Hi everyone, I hope we're all well and still spending time doing some of our stitching as lockdown now has sort of eased a little bit. When this video comes out, hopefully things will be pretty much back to normal. So I am videoing this just as we are beginning to come out of lockdown because I've been getting a little bit ahead with this book. I know a few people have said that it's quite addictive, and I am finding it quite addictive. It's quite a nice distraction to sit and do this on an evening. So I'm going to get on with the next pages. So we've been quite heavily intensive with all of our pages, lots of different fabrics and things like that. And one of the things I always like to do within a piece of work, which we did a little bit with the Sew for the Soul hanging, is have what I call a breather. So we're going to turn over, again, leave your pages, these will be stitched back together. And what we're going to do for our breather is you're going to have your main colour, so mine's the grey, and you're going to choose one other colour. So mine was influenced by, I just got some fabrics from Empress Mills, and there's this beautiful fabric that's got this tiny little check-in. I have used it in a few other places. I've got it in other colours, so I've got it in the yellow, the mustard yellow as well. I don't think I've got any of the other colours. But I think each month I'm probably going to keep investing in another piece because it is the most beautiful fabric. And I got a grey linen. I had got a dark blue linen as well, but when I was playing around just layering up the colours, I just felt the blue and the grey with nothing on was quite flat, and this was quite nice. Then you've got to decide which way they're going to go around. Now the way that you lay this one out is going to be quite important because it is going to have a knock on to the next pages that we're going to do. So what you need to do for this one to gather your stash together is 2 pieces of fabric. That's it. I've got my background fabric, which is going to stretch across both of the pages. So what I've done is I have just pinned that on. Now, because we're going across a join, you do need to pin that and then push it into your join so that you know that it's going to go right in. And I've just pinned it all the way along. I've left it a little bit longer because I am beginning to wonder when I come to do the join on this next one, we might do a join that wraps around. So I am going to keep a little bit of that added on, not this much, I will trim it a little bit in a second. And then you're going to get a strip of your other fabric. So what I've done with this one is I absolutely loved the raw edge that was on the piece of fabric. So I just thought I'm going to keep that on because it's that lovely texture. And you're just going to lay a strip. Now, as I just said, the layout of this is really, really important. We need to leave an area up here because we're going to do something on this particular piece that's going to go through to the other one. So we're actually going to create a hole that's going to go through there. Because we've done fairly simple stitches, I know some of you have explored other stitches. The idea with this one, with just having a breather, is actually just to enjoy stitch. So we've got this piece of fabric, this lighter piece of fabric that we're going to base a lot of our stitching on. Some of it might come over onto the edge, but we're really going to have a heavily embroidered piece of fabric here. And the background, we're not really going to do that much to, apart from, as I say, this hole that we're going to cut. Once I've done that, it might be that I come back here and do something else. It's like I said, don't tend to have a plan of exactly how these pages are going to look. I've just got a starting point. So the starting point with this one is it's a breather because it's not got a lot of fabric on it, but it's going to have a lot of stitch. So when it comes to stitching, I've gathered together a range of threads. So I've got some linen, some Danish cotton, my perlés and my silk threads, and I've tried to stick with the similar sorts of colours. So I've gone with like the dark blues and different greys, so that we're not throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. Once you've got all this stuck down, like I say, we're going to trim this off, flip it over. So I want to know that this is going to, this is the problem with cotton wadding. It picks up absolutely everything that you've been doing. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to trim that, probably maybe about 1 inch off. Now, it might be that I end up cutting this off altogether, but it's just when we're doing the pages going from one to the other, I had wondered about when we join these pages together, is this might just come round and then we might tuck it under, so it might just give us a really nice neat edge just on one of those pages. So just keep that there. So what I then need to do is I need to tack the fabric down that I have pinned, but I don't want to see the tacking stitches this time. So I'm using a dark blue silk thread, and what I'm going to do is some little stab stitches. So just start in the corner, and basically you go back, practically back down where you've just come up. Oops. And I'm going to space them out probably about every centimetre, just making sure I'm just going through my wadding. It is just a little bit further on than that edge because I can come and trim things back off afterwards, but if you have gone beyond the edge of your base page, just make sure, whoops, when it comes to stitch, just pull the pin out then, don't know where this is, just make sure that you go all the way through. The other thing that you need to be careful of, when I was busy pinning this earlier on, I had pinned 2 pages together. So just make sure that you are just doing the 1 page. So I'm going to come up and then practically back down where I came up, and it just gives you, it's a tiniest, I don't know if you can see that, it's the tiniest little dot that you can see. Now I know I can see it on this one, but this is where I am going to be doing a lot of stitching, so these ones will disappear. When it comes to doing the stitching, we're going to go through loads and loads of different stitching. I will do some demonstrations on one, but I do have a little video that I did of 9 of my favourite stitches. So I've got these ones here. So this is the hoop that I did, that's the sample for that particular thing. So it goes through bullion knots, French knots, pistol, seeding stitch, connected and unconnected flies, connected and unconnected chain stitch, blanket stitch, stem stitch and satin stitch. So we're probably using quite a few of those. So if you do need a bit of a refresher, it is a lefty's viewpoint. I know a few people have said don't apologise for being lefty. I'm not apologising for being lefty at all. I love being left-handed. Kind of makes me feel a bit special. But I just know that it can be quite hard sometimes for left-handed people to find demonstrations of particular techniques. So again, as we're going around, oops, just start removing the pins. So choose a thread. A machine thread is fine. I'm just using a silk thread because they just happen to be the ones that I have on my desk at the moment, but a machine cotton is fine. I have posted on some previous things as to where I get my threads from, because I know I've mentioned it's been quite hard just working with what you've got at home. Particularly, I've found online shopping has become very, very dangerous. I think I'm going to have to ban myself from doing any online shopping at the moment because I'm losing track of all the fabric that I'm buying. And I can't wait to go to my next vintage fair or something. Totally gutted that Yarndale isn't on in Skipton this year. It's usually my biggest show, but hopefully they'll do something online, and I do know for that weekend I will have or one of the weekends in September I will start posting all the stuff that I would have had with me at Yarndale, particularly my kits, which I know quite a few people have bought. It's always lovely if you have bought one of my kits, please send me a photo of what you've done. It's always really nice to see everybody else's take. I think that's one of the things that I've absolutely loved with the Sew for the Soul community videos, is the fact that you're all given the same instructions, but because we're all doing different colours, it's just so nice to see other people's work. Yeah, what you're going to want to do is when you get round to this bit here, which is the flat bit, I'm going to do some stitches just down there just to hold that in place. So what I tend to do is open that up as a single page, and then I can just get in and just start stitching. It doesn't matter if it's not right in the edge, it just means it'll just hold this bit in place. Okay, I know somebody had posted on one of, I think it was on the tutorial about left-handed people being cack-handed, and it really did make me giggle, because that is a saying that I know from being left-handed. People telling you that you're cack-handed. If you've no idea what it means, you will do if you're left-handed. I don't know why, 'cause it's just, you just seem to struggle more with things. I don't know why. So again, tiny, tiny little stitches. Probably not going to have enough to go along the bottom as well. This connecting piece here, it doesn't matter if that's not stitched down with as many stitches, because this is the section that we're really going to embellish with our stitch. I just felt like I needed a few evenings just to sit, not have to think about adding fabric and cutting this and cutting that, and just to sit with a range of threads and just think, right, I'm going to start with this stitch and explore it. Okay, now I've got down to the bottom. Right, I'm going to have enough just to write, so I'll just quickly go back along the bottom. Again, just double checking that I am actually on my wadding. There's nothing more annoying, oops, firstly your needle coming unthreaded, nothing more annoying than thinking you've just stitched everything together and then lifting it all up and finding that you actually hadn't. Okay, so what I'll be doing is exactly the same on the other page. There we go. And it just holds this in place, leaving the pins in the strip going along. So what I'll probably do is some big straight stitches to start off with, just to hold that, and then I can really start playing around. Now when I say playing around with stitches, we are really going to play around with stitches. Different size threads, different lengths, widths of stitch, and really, really, really want to make it ever so textured. So finishing off around the other side. Don't come out of my needle. That's always annoying. I just make a loop. She says, make a loop. There we go. Just pop my needle through it. Just a couple of times, just to create a knot. There we go. Okay. So that's that page, just with it all just tacked, tiny, tiny little stitches. So you can see slightly bigger stitches around there, but on this side, you can't see, apart from just a little bit on the grey, you can't really see any of those stitches. So what I'll do next is I will do exactly the same around the other side at this end, making sure that I do catch my wadding and not that bit there. And then I'll come back and we'll start talking about what we're going to do along the bottom. Okay, so I've got that all stitched down, so a tiny little stitch. So if you look there, you've got the back of the stitch at that side, and same at the other. I've left some pins just in this section here, just to hold this strip down. So what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm just going to do a straight stitch that just meanders across the whole thing, because then that's going to give me a line to start working all my other stitching on. So I'm going to use a perlé thread in a dark blue to start off with, and I'm going to start on the blue, just making sure that I'm on the edge. Oops, you can see. So I'm just going to start off on the blue, and just start doing a running stitch. So again, there's no definite plan of what's going to go on. Okay, so here we go, we're off. If you wanted to, you could draw yourself a line on your fabric. When it comes to fabric choices, this is totally up to you, but I would suggest that this piece that's going to go down the middle is fairly plain, because you want the stitches to be the showcase piece, but the backing could be whatever you wanted. So I would tend to have this strip as my base colour, so the colour that you're doing throughout. So this first line of stitching really is just to give me a starting point. This first line of stitching we'll try and keep fairly regular, but when I was talking earlier about really playing with your stitches, then that's what you need to do. Now when you come to the join where you're going over the fold, what I've done is I've just caught the back, I'm going back up that grey, but then this next stitch that I'm going to do, I've got to make sure it then comes through onto the next page. I know a few people have asked why am I not doing this as a flat book and then putting it all together. I think it's because I just wanted to work in a book, and I know it does have its problems, as you can see, just manoeuvring it about, but I just felt if I worked on just flat pieces, it didn't feel like a solid piece of work, and I like the idea of being able to turn from one to another and actually see that connection. So this line's just sort of going to come off into the background a little bit. Bring it back down. There we go. So you can sort of see I'm creating myself now a line. Oops. Just to start working from. Now, because this is going to be quite a highly stitched piece, I'll probably end up doing little snippets of video just to show you the stitch that I'm going to do, and then I'll go off and carry on with that stitch and then come back and show you what I've done. Because hand stitching, number one, for somebody who is known as a wobble gob, I do run out of things to say sometimes, which is quite shocking really. But also it's not the most exciting thing to sit and watch somebody hand stitching when you could be getting on with your own. So I'm going to come back with another line of stitching, but this time I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. So this is what I was saying about playing with your stitching. We're going to use different stitches, but each time we use them we'll either get bigger or smaller or overlap. So I'm probably going to end up with 3 lines of straight stitch, just following this meandering line that I've started with. Now I've done a curved line. You don't have to. It could be a straight line, it could be a zigzag, you might swirl and then go off. Like I've said before, it is totally and utterly up to you how you plan and do your pieces. So I've got this meandering line. I'll probably do that line there, and what I might do is get another colour and I might do a meandering line coming the other way as well. What that's going to give me then are areas to really start playing around with different types of stitching. So that's where we're going to start. Still quite simple to start off with, because I know some people have said that they're new to embroidery and it can be a little bit daunting, but this will be an ideal page to really start playing around with some of the different stitches that we can do. So I'll be back shortly when I finish doing my straight stitch, and then we'll start looking at the next stitch that we're going to do. Okay, so I've just had a lovely little bit of time there just doing a little bit of straight stitch. If I fold that end under, You can see that's where the edge of that page is going to go. So I kept wondering why my stitch kept finishing off and kept forgetting that that was my extension bit of fabric. So I've done 3 lines of straight stitch and a double line there, coming off just slightly off the edge, and then I'm going to look at my next few stitches that I'm going to do. That I'm going to start off basing it along that edge. I've just, while I've been on, like you do, you're busy looking at different sort of things, I've come across the word ORT, O-R-T, which means scraps or remainders. And I got it via our Embroiderers Guild website, who got it from somewhere else, where you have a little jar and you start popping in all your little scraps of threads and you keep them throughout the year, and then you can see all the different colours that you've been working on. So I've just started my ORT, which is quite good because I do have, normally when I pick up my things like this, I've got lots of little bits and pieces that just end up just, well, you just throw them away. I always feel sad when I throw things away, which means then it's another thing now I've got to start keeping. So I've got my little jar that I'll start adding, which would be quite nice actually. I wish I'd started doing this then at the front of the book, because then you'd have got a little collection of threads that sort of built up all the different colours that you've been using. So if you're just starting out, that's something you could do. Right, so I digress. So what I'm going to do next is I've got 3 different threads. So I've got a pearly, a cotton thread and a silk thread, and I'm going to start just showing you the next 3 stitches that I'm going to do. So the first one is going to be a blanket stitch. So I've got a very pale pearly thread, and I always have to think when I am doing a blanket stitch. So this is your blanket stitch, where you end up with a nice line and the legs coming off. And when we've talked about playing around with the stitch, it's about how wide that is, how long the legs are, how it meanders, and I always just have to get my head round it, which way I need to work to get the legs going in the right direction. So I want my legs to go that way, so I need to work upside down. So just remember to unfold that and make sure I'm not sticking through on 2 pages. So my first one, I'm going to follow that line to give me sort of like a top edge. So your blanket stitch, you're going to come up, just make sure I'm just still on my wadding. Okay, lay your thread across the direction that you're going to be traveling in, and then you're going to create the leg of your stitch. So just one little stitch there. That thread then comes underneath, pull it through, and you have created the first bit. Don't know why that doesn't seem to be focusing at the moment. My camera does seem to play up. I've had it on autofocus, which was a nightmare because it kept going in and out of focus, and now I've got it on a fixed focus, so hopefully you can sort of see what's going on. So to travel along then, I just keep this coming along here because this is going to give me my neat line, and then I just keep creating each of the legs. So I could start off with them fairly even. So once you've put your needle in, just make sure that thread's going behind your needle. Just pull it through, sort of creating that loop. You can see that, and then that holds it. So then you can make them a little bit shorter. So coming along, so I could get these a bit shorter as they're coming along the straight bit. Start spreading them out a little bit. So I think one of the things with the stitching is the fact that you're in control. You can decide how long, how big, how far you want your stitches. And I do want you to start overlapping the ones that you've already done. So we're not going to see these as just singular stitches. So you can sort of see I'm beginning to build that shape. So as I'm coming around the top of this curve, I want to extend the arm or the leg of my stitch. Don't pull it too tight. Pull it too tight, it's going to start really scrunching your fabric up. Let's get rid of that one page. So the piece of fabric that you've laid over as we start stitching over the top will start pegging itself down, or stitching itself down. I just keep getting paranoid, which I have. Oh no, I haven't. I thought I had. Got hold of 2 pages. Okay, so if you can see, I'm just building that now up and over the top. The weather here today is very, very strange. I've had to actually pull the blinds down and put cardboard up around my station, because even though the weather's not that brilliant today, it's quite bright, but then with the cardboard up, I can't see what I'm doing. So we've got, you can make decisions then as you are going through this. So originally I was going to follow that whole shape, but I quite like the idea of that possibly mirroring that line that goes down, just to give me a semicircle instead. So let's start coming down. Oops, knocking things now, it's all going pear-shaped. So if you just lay that there, you know where you're stitching up to. So your needle comes up just in front. I'll just hold that up. So the thread goes underneath, and there's my needle. Sort of start getting that quilted feel as well with the cotton wadding, because you're stitching, I'm getting like a ridge that's forming. So again, think about how wide you want your stitches, where you want it to go. So I'm going to come across here, this one. I do like blanket stitch. It's a nice one to edge things with. I think I might take that a little bit closer. It's another one of those stitches that once you get going, it's fairly straightforward, but it's just getting your head around which way around you need things to go. So I want to start finishing this off, so I'm going to start making these a little bit smaller. And then it's going to disappear because I've got that fringe in. So just to finish your blanket stitch off, when you've got to the edge or the end of where you're going, all you do is go straight through with your needle, pull it so it gives you that edge. Oop. Oh, banging everything today. And then just find a little thread just to tie it off on. So that's a blanket stitch. So I will do more of those, but I just wanted to show you 2 others for you to have a go at. Okay, so put that back round the other way. So we've got a really nice shape going up and over that side. Okay, so that's that stitch. So the next one that I was going to look at is a seeding stitch. So a seeding stitch is this one here, where you can have them lots and lots of little shapes going in different directions, or you can create shapes. I quite like those sort of little star shapes. I think they're ever so pretty, but I'm going to start with the seeding. So what I've got for that is a silk thread, and I've doubled it because it's a silk and it's quite fine. I've got 2. So this is really good for filling in shapes. So I've got a little section here that I'd probably put my seeding stitch in. So the idea with this is it basically is just a little straight stitch. It's just in and out, backwards and forwards, up and down. But what you're trying to do is create something that's quite random, which is easier than it sounds, because you do find yourself getting in a set way of working and set directions. Double threads sometimes can be a bit of a pain because you end up with loops every now and again. Okay, so I don't know how well we can see that. Just do a few more. So again, just making sure that I'm sticking, and I've still got some of my backing page in there. So this is really nice for building up texture and also filling in an area. But what I tend to do is to try and help me continue with this randomness is I turn my page, or I turn my piece of work, and then carry on stitching, because then you sort of find that you'll sort of still be stitching the same direction that you were before, but because you've turned the page round, it just adds a little bit more. What you then want to do is have a look at where you've not stitched as you've been going round, and you sort of start filling in the gaps. Lots of little stitches in lots of different directions. And again, if you're playing around with this stitch, they could start off really, really small and then increase in size. I know you probably can't see this very well because the thread is fairly similar to my colour background. It's just little stitches. You can do shapes if you want to do shapes, but I just quite like this because it adds something, especially doing it with the silk thread. You get a tiny little bit of a sheen. So I've got my blanket stitch here, so I can stitch right into the shapes that were created with my blanket. If I wanted to, I could go over the top, but I'm going to keep this contained just to this end bit, and then I might do another little bit over there, just so there's a bit more continuity with everything. Okay, just try and get to the end of this bit of a thread. So if I hold that up, don't know how well you can see it, but what I'll do is I'll do like I've done with previous videos, and I'll do some close-up photographs so that you can see some stills of some of the areas that I'm working on. So not the most exciting thing to look at. But I've received some lovely messages from people just saying that they're really enjoying just taking an hour every now and again and just picking up their book and doing a little bit more stitching, which really is the whole point of all the projects that I've done. So the Sew for the Soul one was just about picking up something to stitch just while you're sat on an evening. That's usually my favourite place. If I'm not sat in the garden, it is usually just sat while I'm watching the telly. Just have a little basket with all my bits in. I can just pick it up and make a start. Put it down when you finish, pick it up again. I think it's quite nice to work like that as well, because every time you pick it up, you end up looking at it slightly differently. Sometimes not in a good way. You can end up looking at it thinking, oh dear, that didn't work. But if I do that, I don't unpick anything, because I just think at the time that I did it, I liked it. So I have to accept the fact that sometimes you don't like it. So now when I was doing the stuff at Puffs, especially with it being pink, I got to a stage where I really, really was not enjoying what I was doing. But you persevere with it, you usually just find that little bit of fabric or that bit of lace or just something that just really elevates what you've been doing. Okay, I'm just about getting to the end of my thread. Oops. Okay, so that's a blanket stitch and a seeding stitch to add to our straight running stitches. So I'll carry on stitching that again, and I'll probably do another little area. It might be a slightly different colour that I use, but still use the same stitch. So you want that idea of it still looking like a whole piece. Okay, so I'll just tie that off at the back. There we go. Pop that little bit in my new jar. It's a bit exciting. A bit there, got a bit there. Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, so there we go so far. So hold that there. You can sort of begin to see that little bit of seeding stitch that's going on. Because it's a very similar colour to the grey, you can't really see it that well. But I think I like that because it's sort of, you can sort of start seeing it shrunken it up a little bit, and it just has a texture to this really flat linen that I've put on. So the next one we are going to do is one of my other favourites, which is a connected fly stitch. So I'm going to do that in a cotton thread. So everything I've done so far has travelled along my pieces. So what I'm going to do this time, let's get rid of the knot, oops, is I'm going to go through it, but still not necessarily straight up and down. I'm still going to meander a little bit. So if I start here, because as soon as we started building that bit up, so connected fly stitch, get my single page. So this is basically, you create a Y shape, and you can do variations by not having a tail on. It can just be a V, or you can add tails, and then you can vary it by how big the Y is up at the top, and then obviously you can connect it as it's going down. So it's the connected one that I want to look at first. I use that a lot if I'm doing plants and flowers, and I tend to use it for the stems. So what you want to do is get your thread, you create that Y, the needle goes in at the other side and comes up, and this thread's going underneath the needle. You come up and then decide what direction you want this tail to start going in. So there I've made my first one. So I could leave those as single ones and just do them all over the place, or if I want to connect them, all I do is the next top of the Y that I'm going to do, when I come up at the bottom of the shape there. So my needle's coming up through the bottom, get it out, and then again decide what direction I want it to start going in, and then you just carry on up and over. There we go. So I'm working upside down at the moment, which I think sometimes is quite nice, because it's a surprise then when you turn your work back round, and then you can start thinking about what other stitches you want to include and where you would like to put them. Okay. So these ones I've kept fairly even, but you can play around, and I would advise you just to really play around with what you're doing. Now you can decide then either just to stop at the top, it's not the top, it's the bottom. Turn that round. No, I think I want that to come into my background ever so slightly. Okay. Oops. There we go. I'm just going to do one more. On with that. There we go. And finish that off. Flip it round. To create your loop. Oops. Pop it through. 1, 2. There we go. Okay. Where are we? There we go. So started working then on this section here and add in a little bit more stitch. So it is going to be really heavily stitched. I might even, because I quite like that there, but I'm liking the idea of trying to build this and blend it a little bit into the background. So I might even add a few more, or maybe just here, a few more of my blanket stitches, and then possibly come back in here and do one maybe mirroring that one there. And I'll probably do it in a similar colour, and then I might have a play around with those littler ones and other shapes. So those are the 3 stitches that I'm going to be playing with next, and when I've done that I'll come and we'll go on to the next set of stitches that we're going to start playing with. Hi, well, we're back again. Just thought I'd do a little bit of an update, quick evening one, because I'm desperate to carry on stitching with my piece. So where we've got up to now, then I have added in the connected fly stitch and also the seeding stitches, and I'll put some photos on just before this bit just so you can get some closer viewpoints. And we're just going to carry on building up the stitching. So I'm going to go with a darker thread, and the next thing I want to start looking at are French knots. One of my favourite stitches. Absolutely love a French knot. So just deciding where you want to start and thinking about how you want to build them up on your page. Just have to keep reminding myself not to do a double page and untuck that edge as well. So if I was going to start doing French knots, I quite like this line that's going up here, so I'm going to do some knots possibly coming up and across and start filling in that area. So working with a French knot, basically there's 2 different types. You can do tight ones and loopy ones. So what you want to do is have your thread away from the hole and point your needle away from the hole along the side of the thread. Wrap your thread round. Depending on the type of thread and how many times you go around will depend on how loopy or knotty or big your knot is. And then you're going to go back down where you've come up. If you just pull this thread here, you get your knot connected there at the bottom of your needle, and then just pull your needle through and you are left with your knot on the surface. So if you want some small ones, because it might be that you want to fade them out so that you sort of create it gradually going up, you possibly will just wind it around twice, and then you get a teeny tiny knot compared to a slightly bigger knot. Loopy knots, so if I come a little bit further up, if I wanted to make it a little bit more textured, if you just wrap your threads around, and rather than pulling it tight, when it comes down here, don't gather your knot up at the bottom, just leave this thread quite loose, and then just slowly again pull your thread through, and what you'll end up then is a loopy knot. So I'm going to build up my French knots. It's one of those things as well that once you get yourself into a bit of a rhythm, they build up quite nicely. So just add a few more. And they're quite nice if you add them all together. Now I've started with the dark blue that sort of matches my background fabric, but I might mix in some other colours as well. So I might leave some little gaps and then start adding some more. So I think what I'll probably end up doing is start with it quite fine and get it coming up and over and just fill it in that particular bit. And then, like we've been talking about with mirroring different sorts of shapes, I might choose something over here, maybe here, to start building some more. Maybe I might have 3 lines of loopy knots going on that particular section. So the French knots are the next thing that we're going to start building up. What I'd also like to start doing as well is continuing to add in other stitches. So I quite liked where I've got my lighter one here just going into that edge. So what I might do is get my lighter grey, so this one's going to stand out. It's nice to use these different tones of thread. Now, playing around with stitches, so I'm going to look next at a cross stitch. Thread my needle. There we go. So cross stitches, you could do them very regular. So I've got the cross that's on the back of my backing fabric. So I could marry that sort of size up, or I could really start playing around with crosses. And again, they're going to flow across my piece. So it's just thinking about where you could build them up. So my French knots, I wouldn't necessarily just do a few French knots and then start another one. I'd get all my French knots done and then I would just start this. But I was just going to make a start on it just so that you can sort of see that beginning to take shape. So if I start at this side here, make sure I've not got my double piece. So because my crosses in my background fabric are like that, I think I'll probably carry on that particular feel rather than twisting it around. So I am doing a few stitches on the backing fabric, just not that many, because we really want to focus all the stitching that we're doing on the strip that's going along our piece. So just start stitching some of those and then start coming into this particular piece. So again, playing around with the size and the scale of your stitch. Oops. There we go. Coming into here. And then I might start doing some really teeny tiny ones. So you can sort of see I've started building these crosses up. I'm going to open this up onto a single page. It just makes my life just that little bit easier. And I don't want to have, I don't think I want too many of these. It's just a little section that sort of just picks up on the pattern that I've got in the background. The stitches that I'm using, you don't have to use all these stitches, and you might have a favourite stitch that you want to use and play around with them however you want to play around with them. So just get a few more small ones there. So these are the next two stitches. It's going to be the French knot, oops, through that, and cross stitch. So if I just open that up again, back up, there we go. So you can see I've started building these little crosses in from this side. So what I might do is fade them out as it comes into this shape here, and then I might pick them back up and take them across. So you're beginning to take inspiration. It was initially from that straight stitch that was meandering around, and then I'm fitting other stitches into it. So you're just taking inspiration from those different types of stitches. So French knot, cross stitch, that's the next stitch that we're going to start focusing on. Again, I'll put some photos close-ups so that you can see the different sections that I've done, and then we'll come back when I've done that. Right, so been busy stitching with my knots on there, so I'm beginning to build it all up. Done some cross stitch down in this corner, and I'll probably extend that over there. So You can carry on stitching this little bit as much as you want, and I'm probably going to add a little bit more, but the one thing that I wanted to talk about in this little bit was I talked about this section here that we were going to do something just a little bit different with. I have joined a thing called Stitch Club, which is with the textileartists.org online, and they did a stitch club, and I took part in an online workshop with Debbie Liddon, that's her name there, and we were doing there were 3 pieces of work that we were doing, but I only did one. I know a few people commented on it on one of my Instagram posts. So one of the things people were fascinated with the holes, and I just thought, oh, it'd be really, really nice to add some holes through so you can start looking through. So I'm just going to do a quick demo on how to do this, but I did get this from her workshop, so I just thought I'd show you how to do this. So what we're going to do is you're going to need a piece of wire. This is just a bit of floristry wire and something to create your circle with. So you need to work out something that's going to go in this corner here that's about the right size. So this is just one of my little button tins. And what you want to do is just wrap it round. If you don't have any wire, some cord will do, but I think the wire is going to work better because it'll just give us something a little bit more stable, because these are soft fabric pages. Okay, so just wrap it round. Doesn't matter if it's not, it doesn't have to be a circle. It could be any shape whatsoever, but I'm just going to go with a circle because I just want it to look like a hole going through my book page. Right, let me check that on the back. Might have made it just a little bit too big. So I'm just going to do that, let's pull it round just a little bit more. There we go, that's a bit better. Okay, so this is what we're going to use as the rim, and then basically we're going to cut a hole in our piece and then stitch this on. Now we're going to do it on just that single page to start off with, but when we go through and we're doing the next page here, we are going to cut a hole in that so you will be able to see through. Okay, right, I've got some pliers. There we go. Just turn that around just so then you've not got a sharp bit sticking out. There we go. Just wrap that round. Squeeze. Okay, right, so we've got our hole, our shape. Okie dokes. Because mine's a dark fabric, if I drew on there, I wouldn't be able to see through. So I'm going to turn my page over. I'm going to pop my circle where I want it, and then just with a pen, just on the inside, so I'm about, I don't know, 2 or 3 mil. I'm going to put myself just some little dots, just going around the inside, just so I've got something just as a guide. Okay, and then with my scissors, making sure you have just got hold of one page, cut through, and then just go around. Now I'm going to do this as a whole circle. Sometimes when I've done this I do cut it in the middle and then cut out, because I'm going to remove a circle of the fabric from the other side. And as we've done with other things, I like saving stuff, so it might be that when I turn it back over there might be somewhere that that circle could go. Okay, so just go all the way around. Right, around, there we go. Okay, so I've got my little circle. I'm going to keep that, possibly keep that as well. So flip that round. So we've now got a hole. It looks like a moon. But the circle that I've got here, it might be that I come back in and pop that there. Even the cotton wadding that I've got, I probably won't add it here. It might be that when I've done my hole all the way through, we come onto this side, because we're going to be working more with circles on this side. I'll probably keep that. Now I'm saying I'm going to put this somewhere safe. For me, putting things safe means that I promptly lose them. I'm just going to pop them over there on the side. Okay, so what we now need to do is bind this on to here. Okay, and we're basically just going to stitch around. So it's up to you whether you choose a colour that's going to blend in. I think I'm probably going to do one that stands out, so I've got a little bit of a contrast. I've got my greys. Don't know whether or not to go for a darker. Probably go for this one because it sort of matches the backing fabric that I've got. Okay. Most things I've got myself all ready. Oh, there's something in them that I hadn't got a needle. There we go. Right. I've got a needle with a very small hole. Get one with a slightly bigger hole. There we go. Oh, sorry, don't really want to see my arm. Okay. There we go. Okay, so all I'm going to do to start off with is just tack it and just make sure that I've got it in certain places. So what you're going to do is you're going to come up at one side. Okay, coming up at that side. Oops. And then you're going to come through this hole and then back up the other side. So what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm just going to work my way around, probably every centimetre, just so then I know that I've got this in place. So it'll just hold it. It means then it'll just make it just that bit easier to stitch it in place. Oops. So this bit, as you can see, is a little bit fiddly once you start going. There you go. So it's going to pull that fabric towards the wire. There you go. Now if you think that you're seeing a little bit too much of your wadding, you can always go and trim it, but by the time we've gone round this a couple of times, you're not going to be able to see it. There you go. So just on the outside of your wire and then through the hole in the middle. Okay, so I'm coming up on the outside and then back through the hole, and I'll come back when I've got that just stitched in place. Right, so I've gone all the way around, so it's all tacked in place. Not pulled it too tight, because as I come round it'll get neater and neater and neater. So the next job then is just to keep going round, so you can get closer and closer together. So eventually you won't see the wire. You'll end up with a ridge of stitching that then will create our little window. What this is going to do then, it'll add a bit more interest to some of the pages, because when we've attached it then to the hole that we'll do at the other side, we will be able to have a little window through, so you'll get a little glimpse of what's coming next. Okay. So it's just a case of going round and round and round. You could change colour if you wanted to. You could go around in one colour and then intersperse it with another colour. But as you can see, once you've got it tacked in place and you're not trying to hold your fabric and hold the wire at the same time, it's a little bit easier to go around. So like I say, the wire that I use was just a length of florist wire, but you could use paper wire. You just don't want it too thick, and also you don't want it too heavy, because obviously then it's going to weight down your page, which we don't want. Okay, so you can sort of see I'm beginning to cover it all in that section there, so I'll work my way all the way around. So then when you look at your double page, get it open up, there we go, you will have whatever we end up having through on the other side. You'll have a little bit of a window, and when we turn that back, whatever's gone on here, you'll have the little window of the blue in there as well. So like I say, we will be attaching that together, and we will do a hole there, but we're not going to cut that out because we need to work on this next double page. So this one, which is our breather page, because it's not, say it's not as full, it is full, it's just not got loads of fabrics on there, it's just a little bit calmer. And actually I do think it looks a little bit like the sea with a moon, which really wasn't intentional at all, but I quite like that. So I'm going to carry on stitching around there, and I'll probably then continue doing some stitching on here. One of the things that I had done when I did my piece on the Debbie workshop, I interspersed the French knots in and around there. So just looking at this piece here, I might actually do some French knots, so then it connects it somehow. So that's where we're at the moment. Hopefully you're really enjoying it, and I will come back when this double page is finished. See you in a little bit. So this is the last little bit on this video. All done. Ready for starting my next page. So the hole's all finished now, and you can see where I've added lots of tiny little, I ended up doing cross stitches because I'd already got some cross stitches coming here. I ended up having the cross stitches sort of floating across the piece of work, so I'm really pleased with that. I really like the hole. I think that's just a really nice touch, something a little bit different. So I've pinned it to my other page, ready for doing another little one about joining your pages together. So we're ready to move on to the next double page. So it's exciting having that blank canvas, and I will update you on what's going to come here shortly. Enjoy.